So I am very glad to introduce my own student, Dr. Rupesh Srivastava, who is currently working as Associate Professor at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. So Rupesh has actually worked in my lab for his PhD. And in my lab, he standardized the protocol for differentiation development of regulatory T cells, and also he standardized this collagen-induced arthritis mouse model, using DBA1J strain. So he has worked hard in my lab, and he was very productive. He has published 2 Journal of Immunology paper, and particularly he investigated the role of interleukin-3 in regulation of Treg cells. After PhD, he went for a postdoc, and he has done 2 one at Columbia University. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some small
some interruption. Yeah.
Just he currently is working on immunobiology of osteoporosis, and his group has recently established the regulatory role of B-Reg cells in osteoclastogenesis and osteoporosis. And Rupesh has received several awards, like G.P. Talwar Young Scientist Award from Indian Immunology Society. Then he has received Science Communicator Award, and he has been on the editorial board of many reputed journals, including Frontiers in Immunology, Endocrinology, Scientific Reports, and many other journals. So I'm very glad that Rupesh is here, and today he's going to talk on humoral and non-humoral function of B cells in inflammation and diseases. So I'll request Rupesh to start his presentation.
Thank you, sir. I'm really glad and honored that you gave my introduction. I'm really happy for that. I'm really honored for that. And I will be starting. So I think my slides are visible.
Yeah, I can see. Just check that they are moving.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
So they are moving. So first of all, I would like to thank the Society for Inflammation Research, and especially Dr. Girdhari Lal, for inviting me for this talk here. And I have tried my best to keep this talk very simple and precise. So my talk is basically on humoral and non-humoral functions of B cells in inflammation. So basically, first of all, I would like to talk about the major timelines in B cell immunology, starting from 1890s till today. So what happened in between 1890 to 1939 was that they discovered that serum has a property of neutralizing toxins, and these substances were called as antibodies, and later they were found that they were basically gamma globulins. Around 1948, just 1 year after independence, plasma cells were shown to discovered to make antibodies. And 59, after 11 years after that, clonal selection theory was formulated, was hypothesized, and both heavy and light chain compositions of antibodies were also elucidated. From 1963 to 64, affinity maturation, which is a major mechanism of how the antibodies, they are matured, how they are having more affinity, was defined. And also the circulating lymphocytes were shown to give rise to the plasma cells. 66 to 968, basically it was discovered that both B and T cells, they cooperate to produce antibody responses. And in 1970, both somatic hypermutation and isotype switching were defined. So these were really wonderful discoveries in the B cell immunology. And 88, ultimately B cell receptor signaling through Ig alpha and Ig beta was discovered and identified. And 89 to 1994, the role of T cells via the CD40 CD40L interaction, how it is responsible for inducing germinal center reaction, was discovered. And also in very year, the suppressor B cells were discovered. They were given the name as suppressor B cells, which in 2000 ultimately it was given the name of regulatory B cells. And between these 20 years from now, and we in 2021 have recently discovered the role of BREX in osteoclastogenesis. So there has been a lot of researchers starting from 1890s to 2021. And now we also have this new member, that the BREX, from the last 20 years. And we are still learning more and more as the years are passing, how these BREX can be involved in various number of diseases and inflammation. So before I continue, I would just like to have a brief outline about the B cell development and their different subsets. So this is a very simple diagram. You can see here that from in the bone marrow or either in the fetal liver, from the stem cells, we have the pro B cells and the pre B cells with the B cell receptors with the surrogate chains. And ultimately we have the immature B cells with only the IgM on them. And after that, it divides, or it can give rise to either of these three types of B cells. The first one is the B1 B cells, which have a fetal liver origin. And they are found in the periphery, in the circulation in very small amount. And basically they are residing in the mucosal and the peritoneal cavity. We also have this marginal zone B cells, which we also call them B2 B cells. They have, apart from IgM, they also has the CR2 receptor. They're found majorly in the spleen and lymphoid organs. The population of both these B1 cells and this marginal zone B cells is very few. And these are found basically also, they have originated in the bone marrow. But these are the third type, which we call as follicular B cells, or these are again B2 B cells. So apart from IgM, they also have the IgD in their membranes, and they also secrete them, basically both of them. So the follicular B cells are the major subtypes of the B cells which are found all around. And they originate in the bone marrow, and they are found majorly in the spleen and lymphoid organs. Apart from this, we also now have the regulatory B cells. So this is how B cell immunity basically works. So we have basically B cells. B cells the immunity can be divided into either humoral immunity or a non-humoral immune component. So the humoral component, we all know very much that it is antibody dependent, based upon the antibodies which are being secreted by these B cells. But we also have this non-humoral immunity component also, which is nowadays very much in trend. These are antibody independent. So what is antibody independent? We will be seeing this also. So basically, I will just start with the humoral immunity component. This can be divided further into either a T cell dependent, where the T cell help is required for the differentiation and activation of these B cells. And this ultimately leads to your affinity matured and isotype switched antibodies, which are very much efficient in clearing the pathogens and inflammation. We also have this T independent mechanism of also humoral immunity, which doesn't need any help from the T cells. That's why they don't have an affinity matured antibody, and they have very limited isotype switch. So that's why these kind of immune response are not that much efficient in clearing of pathogens. But these are very much important if you see with respect to your clearing of various bacterial infections. Now coming to the non-humoral component, that is antibody independent. In this, since the B cells, they don't induce this kind of immunity, or they don't affect this immunity in an antibody dependent manner. So they need something else. So that's why they can be basically either a cytokine or a chemokine dependent, or they can also affect the various, they can work as an antigen presenting cells. So in the case of cytokine or chemokine dependent, it could be either through an effector B cells, which could be inflammatory, via various inflammatory cytokines, or they could be through the BREX, that is anti-inflammatory and regulatory in function via 1035, IL-10, IL-35, and TGF beta. And the antigen presenting cells function basically could be how these B cells are activated and how they process the antigens and present it to the T helper cells, which can later be differentiated into T follicular helper cells, something like that. So this is the basically part which is not always present in various textbooks. And this is something which is now called as non-humoral component of the immunity mediated by the B cells. So first of all, I would like to discuss what is humoral immune responses, what are different phases. So if you see, antigen is being recognized and activated. Antigen is recognized by the B cells, which are naive B cells, IgM positive and IgD positive. And these, with the help of T cell help, they are activated. The moment they are activated, the clone, they proliferate, and that's what is clonal expansion of these particular type of B cells, which recognize this antigen specific antigens, a particular epitope on the antigen. So that's why these particular clone of cells are expanded, and that's what is called as clonal selection theory. And they proliferate, and they can either differentiate into an antibody secreting plasma cells, or they could be an IgG expressing B cells which have been isotype switched from IgM to IgG. And also in the process of this expansion, the antibodies are also matured. They have higher affinity for the antigens, and that's why it is called as affinity maturation, and they have high affinity IgGs, or maybe some other IgGs also, for example, A, E. And also we have the memory B cells, which basically come out very early in the germinal center reactions, and they reside, basically they circulate in all the lymphoid and non-lymphoid organs regularly. So this is a very typical diagram which we all know about what is the primary and secondary humoral immune responses are there. And if you see here, this is very well-known diagram. If you see here, naive B cell is there, it encounters an antigen, they are activated during the first encounter of any infection. And we just have very short-lived plasma cells are generated in the lymphoid organs with the major population of the IgGs of IgGM type, which are the low level of antibody productions are there. And it takes almost 7 to 8 days for basically the primary antibody response to come up against the pathogens. The moment we give a second injection or a second challenge, antigenic challenge, or a booster dose, for example, for the vaccines, this response is very quick and it occurs within 1 to 3 days. And we have a very major secondary antibody response with major IgGs are there. And we also have long-lived plasma cells which live in the bone marrow. And we have also a higher population of the memory B cells. So why this primary and secondary responses are so different? Why we are having this kind of major or huge response in the secondary antibody response? Or if we also give us third encounter, maybe the tertiary responses are going to be even larger than the secondary one. So why this is happening? So if we see here in the secondary immune responses, these are only generated by protein antigens, and they are not, whereas the primary ones can be done via any antigens. It could be nucleic acids, with lipids, or something else. But only proteins are basically needed for a secondary antibody response. So why the proteins are basically only responsible for the secondary antibody response? This is very important to understand this. So that's why there comes the picture of T cells. So T cells are basically required for helping these B cells to mount an antibody response against any antigen, that is a protein antigen. That is basically why dependent upon the follicular B cells which are present in the bone marrow and later on in the various spleen and lymphoid organs. And the moment protein antigen is being recognized by these B cells, they get the help from the T cells via the cytokines and other co-stimulating molecules.
Unmute.
Am I visible now?
No, I think you unmuted. I think by mistake you also once again go back to
your presentation is off now.
Slide share.
Slide share again.
Just a minute. Is it fine now?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah.
So should I start from here itself?
Yeah.
Or
I think go one step back, probably one step back.
Okay, just a minute.
One slide back.
This one?
Yeah, correct. You're right. I think you're in the last point of explanation.
Yeah. So I was talking about why the secondary antibody responses are very much higher in efficiency and amount. The only reason is that these are majorly driven by protein antigens, and that's a major why the protein antigens are basically inducing such a huge secondary antibody response. So the answer is because they get T dependent help cells. So T helper cells are basically helping these B cells to mount this huge amount of antibody response. So how this is happening, I was talking about. So these are follicular B cells which are residing in your spleen or lymphoid organs. They get the protein antigen, and with the help of T cells, they basically, the germinal center reaction is set in, and plasma cells are formed which are secreting antibodies which are isotype switched. All the classes of antibodies can be found, and these antibodies are very much affinity maturation takes place, and they give rise to long-lived plasma cells along with memory cells. But in case of T cell independent B cell responses, this is not happening because we have these two kind of B cells, that is a marginal zone B cells and B1 B cells. So they basically, the polysaccharides, lipids, and nucleic acids, they cross-link the IgG receptors on these B cells. And this is not having any T cell help in the form of cytokines or other co-stimulatory molecules. And that's why they are having very limited isotype switching. And majorly, these are giving rise to only IgGMs. And these are very short-lived plasma cells, and they are not long-lived. That's why the antibody responses, the secondary antibody responses, again, due to the memory formation here, the memory B cells are since formed only in the protein antigens responses. That's why we have a much higher immune responses in your secondary immune response after a secondary challenge of the antigen. So we will see how this mechanism of T-dependent humoral immunity, it all happens in the germinal center or in the spleen or a lymphoid organ. So you can see here antigen, whenever an antigen enters in the circulation, it is being taken up by the lymphatics or the circulation to the nearest lymphoid organs. Either it could be a spleen or a lymph node. And this antigen is basically presented both to the T cells and to the B cells simultaneously. So in the B cell area and the follicle, the B cells have been presented with this antigen, and also via the deceased, the naive T cells are being presented this particular antigen, and this leads to the activation of these T cells and proliferation of T cells, and also these B cells are also activated, and these T cells, they move toward each other towards the edge of the follicle through the various expression of various CCR7, which is down-regulated T cells, but is up in these B cells, so that they can counteract with each other, they can have a signal exchange, and this leads to activation of these B cells, which we call them as short-lived plasma cells because they are only short-lived. And why we need this short-lived plasma cells is not because once an infection is there, we need certain antibodies so that can be taken care of immediately. That's why before going on to long-lived plasma cells, that's why an early isotype switching just takes place, so that fewer amount of antibodies, isotypes are being formed, and they will take care of any infections at that very moment. And the T cells, via the reciprocal signaling, these T cells are basically activated and proliferate induced into extrafollicular T follicular helper cells. And some of these fractions of both these B cells and T cells, then ultimately move into the germinal center. And where with the help of these FDC, the T follicular helper cells, these B cells have basically matured, and with the help of somatic hypermutation, affinity maturation, enhanced isotype switching takes place, along with memory B cell generation and long plasma cell. This is why the secondary antibody response is so high and so specific and so efficient. So the germinal center reaction is very important. I'm just talking about this how once these B cells are entering here, if you see this particular portion, I'm talking about in more detail in this next slide. If you see here, both these B cells and the T follicular helper cells, they enter the follicles. And this is a dark zone where basically the clonal expansion and the somatic hypermutation takes place. And these B cells, they undergo somatic hypermutations of the IgG variable genes, and they migrate after this, they migrate into the light zone, where they encounter the help from the follicular dendritic cells and T follicular helper cells. And the moment they encounter these B cells, they have this high affinity. So the B cells with the highest affinity receptors are selected to survive here. And they again cycle back to the dark zone, where they undergo one more round of somatic hypermutation. So this cycle of going forth and back continues multiple of times. And these repeated mutations basically lead to finally differentiated into your antibody secreted cells, which are much more efficient. With each and every cycle, they are having more and more hypermutations, more and more mutations in their variable IgGs, leading to certain specific B cells which have the more affinity for a particular antigens. And that's why after these repeated rounds of your divisions, some of these B cells basically come out as memory cells, and the other will go into your long-lived plasma cells. So these memory cells will go into the circulation, and these long-lived plasma cells will reside in the bone marrow, and they will be secreting antibodies for our life, more than 30-40 years. And at a time, more than 50% of the titer of antibodies in our body is basically through these long-lived plasma cells for whatever antigens which have been vaccinated in our child. So we still have those long-lived plasma cells living there. So now come how this isotype switching is basically taking place. So this is basically taking place with the help of your T helper cells. So they secrete various cytokines. For example, this T follicular helper cells, they secrete IL-21 cytokine, which leads to activation of these B cells. And if in your milieu we have that IL-21 is there, then this leads to switching from, because normally they were secreting your IgGM will be secreted, which leads to complement activation. So via the IL-21, this IgGs are basically switched into, which leads to opsonization and can function for phagocytosis, complement activation, neonatal immunity. And if IL-4 and 13 are there, it leads to isotype switching for IgE for immunity against your helminths or mast cell degranulation in your allergic reactions. But if we have this BAFF, APRIL, and TGF beta, this leads to the isotype switching towards an IgGA antibodies, which are very much required for the mucosal immunity and maturation of the various gut-associated lymphoid tissues. So now coming to the other part, so T-independent humoral immunity, where the T helper cells help is not needed for the B cell activation. What happens here is that these naive B cells already have these B cell receptors in the form of immunoglobulins. And what happens, these antigens are very big. They have multiple epitopes, repeated epitopes. It could be an LPS or something else. They actually cross-link this B cell receptor. And this B cell receptor basically is enhancing your B cell receptor signaling. And what happens, these B cells are again activated. Activation leads to the formation of plasma cells, which since they are not getting any T helper cells here, that's why there is no isotype switching, and very limited isotype switching has been reported. And majorly they are only IgGM secreting cells. And these are low affinity short-lived plasma cells, and they are not high affinity. What happens apart from this, to enhance this B cell receptor signaling, sometimes this complement mediated your activation of, since the C3b is a complement byproduct of the complement activation, which is this C3b is coated, these pathogens are coated with C3b. And the receptors for C3b, for example, CR2 are there, which enhance the B cell receptor signaling. That ultimately leads to proliferation, differentiation of these B cells into plasma B cells. So this is another part of your how, if the T cell help is not there, then also there could be a humoral immunity. And this is very much required in case of infants, which are newly born infants, because they don't have that robust T cell responses. And that's why the T cell help is not there for the B cell activation. So in those cases, the T-independent humoral is very much required for streptococcus and all the pathogens, to immunity against these kind of pathogens. And these, we know very well the effective functions of various antibodies. They could be basically leading to either your neutralization or opsonization or the coating of these pathogens, and ultimately phagocytosis of the microbes by this Fc receptor mediated phagocytosis. Also, we have this antibody dependent cellular cytotoxicity, where with the help of various NK cells, the cells can be basically lysed or killed. Apart from this, we also have complement activation, where the antibodies, they basically either classical pathway, they lead to activation of complement, leads to your phagocytosis of these microbes along with inflammation and the ultimately lysis of the microbes. And these are the functions of various antibody isotypes, which is very well known. It doesn't need any discussion here. It's very basic. Now coming to the important part, of the very exciting part of this talk, is that the non-humoral functions of B cells, which are not basically dealt with in any of the textbooks which I've been going through. These are only in your research work till now, because this will be added, I think, in future. What are the non-humoral functions of B cells? So non-humoral functions of B cells are basically the functions of B cells which are not mediated by antibodies. So if you see here, we can see it can be either for a tissue development, or via your inflammatory cytokines and anti-inflammatory cytokines which are being secreted. They lead to various other functions also apart from your antibody-dependent responses. If you see here, lymphotoxin alpha-1 beta-2, which is being secreted by these B cells, leads to tissue homeostasis and development of variety of your lymphoid organs, for example, gut, Peyer's patches, tertiary lymphoid organs in infections, for example, in tuberculosis, in your TB infection. These lymphotoxin alpha-1 beta-2 is basically responsible for these tertiary lymphoid structures development in the tissues, along with your spleen organization. Also, we see that bone remodeling via OPG and Rankel, which are secreted by B cells, is also been undertaken by these B cells. So these are the non-humoral functions of B cells. And if the B cells, they also secrete TNF-alpha and CCL3, which promote Th1 cell differentiation. And if the IFN gamma is in the cytokine milieu, is there in the environment, it's supposed Th1 differentiation and even macrophage polarization. And via the GM-CSF, these B cells basically increase IL-12 production by DCs, which enhance their APC function, ultimately leading to your robust adaptive immune responses. We also have this IL-2, IL-6, and lymphotoxin alpha, which support the T follicular helper cell, Th1, Th2, Th17 cell responses. So these are just the B cell responses. Now, since we have this separate subset regulatory B cells, these B-regs via secretion of IL-10, IL-35, and TGF-beta, they basically promote the induction or differentiation of Tregs. Simultaneously, they suppress the Th17 differentiation. That axis is being basically regulated by B-regs. And recently, we have discovered that these B-regs are basically inhibiting osteoclastogenesis and thereby regulating a bone remodeling also. So how these B cells are responsible in various diseases, which are ultimately related to inflammation. So if you see, these B cells are very much reported. For example, if you see neurodegenerative disease in case of your multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, what happens? The cytokines IL-6, TNF-alpha, they basically enhance Th17 cell differentiation. But the B cells are basically responsible for this majorly because via the secretion of IgG antibodies against either your MOG or MBP proteins in the multiple sclerosis. These are basically enhancing these adaptive immune responses. So I'm just talking about the B cells, and I will be discussing B-regs later on in the next slides. So now coming to the type 1 diabetes, if you see the type 1 diabetes and pancreatitis, so what happens in the autoantibodies are basically secreted in case of type 1 diabetes, and they mediate the destruction of pancreatic beta cells. And also the M2 reprogramming takes place. The macrophages are there, the M1 and M2. M2 macrophages reprogramming has been induced, thereby leading, and that promotes enhanced pancreatitis in case of your leading to your destruction of pancreatic tissues. Now coming to the inflammatory bowel disease, a lot of work has been done on IBD with respect to your B cells, and these B cells, they basically home to the gut via this beta-7 integrin molecules in IBD patients, and there the IgG antibodies are basically secreted against the microbial antigens, leading to enhanced decreased production of IgGA and enhanced production of IgG that leads to basically the pathology observed in your IBD patients. Coming on to the recently pandemic, that's COVID-19 also. So B cells, when they are basically due to the inflammatory cytokine milieu of IL-6, IFN gamma, TNFL, and GM-CSF, what happens is that B cells are associated with the disease severity. And the disease, as the disease progresses, these B cells are very much modulated by the induction of plasma cells and the reduction of memory B cells. So we have a lot amount of antibodies of various classes here itself in the case of COVID-19. So with coming to the rheumatoid arthritis, this is also again a very very favorite of mine. The rheumatoid arthritis, basically here the anti-citrullinated proteins antibodies are basically secreted, which mediate immune complex formation and ultimately leading to complement activation, which leads to synovial hyperplasia. Also the memory B cells, they also express Frankel, and that further augments bone loss. So again, B cells are again regulating rheumatoid arthritis. And coming to osteoporosis, B cells, they mediate the dysregulation of Frankel and OPG ratio, which again is very much important for your regulating bone remodeling and enhancing your bone loss via the Frankel OPG, because they both are secreted by these B cells. And coming to the tumors or the cancer, so B cells have been reported to have both the anti and pro in tumorigenic potential. So if they produce inflammatory cytokines and antibodies and APCs activate, they basically affected T cells, they are anti-tumor, they have the anti-tumor potential. But on the other hand, by secreting the IL-10 anti-inflammatory cytokines, they promote tumor growth also. So this is again a dilemma. So what should be done? This will be more dealt in your B-regs. So apart from these B cells, we have the regulatory B cells. So what are these regulatory B-regs? So these are the subsets of B-regs. So these are basically regulatory in nature. They regulate the responses of various other immune cells. So we have recently published this in the last year. These are the various subsets of B-regs in mice and humans. And this one particular subset, this is which we have renamed these as BR2 B-regs, was discovered in 2003 by Dr. Mishra's group, Parekh and Mishra's group. It was discovered that time. And they discovered, this was discovered in India itself, but that time they haven't named it as regulatory B cells. So what the important point was that these are having membrane TGF beta, and TGF beta is very much immunoregulatory molecule. They found that if we are activating these B cells with LP, that is TLR4 mediated activation, then this leads to NRG and CD8 T cells. So these they haven't called it as regulatory BREX, which we ultimately now claimed it as these were called as BR2 BREX having the membrane TGF beta. So this list is not exhaustive. These are the major forms of mice BREX and human BREX subset which have been discovered. And you can note here that all of them are basically secreting either IL-10 or IL-35 or TGF beta are involved. So these three molecules would be common in all the human or mice BREX subsets. So these are again the different phenotype, the year of discovery and mechanism of action. And these were the one which we were discovered in 2003. This here it is written 2001, is a mistake here. So these are found in spleen, lymph node, and blood, and they express membrane TGF beta and cause NRG and hyporesponsiveness in your CD8 T cells. These B10 regs are the major population of B10 BREX, which are very much active. They have the CD19, CD1D high, and CD5 positive. They are also found in the spleen and blood, and they are the major population of BREX in your periphery. And they inhibit the expression of both effector CD4 T cells, DCs, and monocytes. Apart from that, in the humans, we have the CD19 positive, 24 high, and 38 high BREX, which we also call them as transitional B10 cells discovered in 2005. They are found in the blood, and they support the development of Tregs through IL-10 and TGF beta production. We also have this memory B cells. We have 24 high, 19 positive, 24 high, and 27 positive BREX. They recently discovered 2011, and they inhibit the proliferation of TNF-alpha and IL-1 gamma producing CD4 T cells, DCs, and monocytes in an IL-10 dependent and independent pathway. So recently we have discovered this IgGA positive BREX also. One group has discovered this. They recently, 2018, reported that they induced the differentiation of T cells more towards a regulatory phenotype through expression of IL-10 and PD-L1. So this is the most recent one which has been added to this list, because earlier it was found that BREX, they don't secrete antibodies or they don't mediate. So this is also again the phenotype that these are IgGA positive BREX. So now the immunomodulatory functions of BREX are there. So what are these BREX and how basically these are governing this? Either they can be having an inhibitory effect or a stimulatory effect. So these are the inhibitory, how they are working. The BREX via secretion of IL-10 and 35 and TGF beta, they are inhibiting TH17, they are inhibiting TH1 cell differentiation. They're also inhibiting the monocytes. So that's leading to decrease in the IL-17, IL-1 gamma, and TNF-alpha cytokines. And also they are inhibiting CD8 T cell responses. So these are how these BREX are inhibiting these effective functions of these, your helper T cells and your cytotoxic T cells, and along with the monocytes. But we also had how they are regulating other regulatory cells. So these are enhancing your Tregs, your TR1 cells, your DCs, and also your natural killer T cells, invariant actual killer T cells. So this is how BREX are basically known to function, how they are modulating the functions of various other immune cells. So what are their role in various inflammation and disease conditions? So this is how a BREX are having the phenotype and how basically they are regulating. So they have been reported that BREX via IL-10 secretion suppresses allergy and asthma. Also, in case of they prevent graft rejection in various graft transplantation grafts. So via this is again mediated by IL-10. And again, coming to the coronavirus, again, the COVID-19 also recently the paper came 2 months back that they have, if you are suppressing the recovered patients are basically having higher number of, and the frequency and the number of BREX are enhanced in case of your recovery phases of the patients. In the case of autoimmune conditions, these BREX are very much active and they are very much responsible for these autoimmune development. Via IL-10 and IL-35, they basically suppress your multiple sclerosis, IBD, type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and SLE. So list is endless basically. And in case of your tumors and cancers also, they promote, in fact, they promote the tumor just like the Tregs. They are also found to promote the formation of cancer and tumor tissues via IL-35 and TGF beta via inhibiting various effector T cell responses. They have also been reported to suppress inflammation and damage associated with parasites and helminthic via the IL-10 and TGF beta. And recently, we have discovered in the last month itself, we have reported that they are also responsible in an IL-10 dependent manner. They are inhibiting osteoporosis. So what we did was that we discovered the role of B10 BREX in osteoporosis. What we found was that, I'm just taking this a bit in detail. because this was my area of research. So basically what we did was that we basically co-cultured these monocytes, the bone marrow cells, with Bregs at different, these Bregs were activated with LPS so that they can be induced Bregs. And then in the different cell ratio, we co-cultured them, and we found that at higher co-culture ratios in a dose dependent manner, these osteoclasts, these are multinucleated cells. Here you can see that these are all inhibited. We also did functional assays for this, and we again found that these osteoclasts were basically inhibited. And in vivo, what we found in ovariectomy mice model of osteoporosis is that the CD19 positive and IL-10 positive Bregs are very much reduced in case of your ovariectomy mice, significantly reducing both bone marrow and spleen. So bone marrow is a site of osteoclastogenesis, and a spleen is where these Bregs are being induced. So we again found that key how this has been regulating your bone remodeling. And this is what we reported, that both in vitro and in vivo, in case of your osteoporotic model, these Bregs are becoming both the numbers in an IL-10 dependent manner. This is basically inhibiting inflammatory bone loss in postmenopausal osteoporosis. So basically the future would be something like that. Bregs based cellular therapy can be employed in various inflammatory diseases, not only in your RA, but also we can employ that in osteoporosis itself with this particular discovery. So this is what we do at our group. So we are an osteoimmunology group at AIIMS. So basically this ends my talk, and this is just one slide. What we do, we are in various osteoimmune systems. We are looking into how bone and osteoimmune system are basically regulated by your different pathogens, how fertility is being regulated, how we can target this virus, dietary supplements, environmental pollutants, phytotherapeutics, and gut microbiome. And this is what we discovered, a term, immunology of osteoporosis, recently, where we have shown how these Bregs are basically now also, we have added this, apart from their Treg and TS78 cell axis, we have also added this Bregs. We are pioneer in this, and we're working towards how we can exploit this regulatory axis for enhancing your bone health in various inflammatory diseases such as osteoporosis. So this is my small group, and I thank my mentors, and Dr. Vani is already here. I thank Sir for mentoring me, so that and it is due to his effort that I'm here today, and all my students and collaborators, host institutes and funding, and especially MICE, which have given their life for this noble cause of ours. So thank you, all of you, and I would be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Rupesh. It's a very nice talk, and you have very nicely explained and discovered the role of non-humoral functions of Breg cells in inflammation and diseases. And Rupesh has been very productive after joining AIIMS. He has discovered the new area, and he has published several papers independently. So congratulations, Rupesh.
Thank you, sir.
And I have one question. So now you have discovered the role of Breg cells in as an anti-inflammatory and pro-inflammatory. So what is in the clinical setting? Anybody has done in a clinical sample, what is the actual, how these Bregs regulate, whether they have more anti-inflammatory activity or more pro-inflammatory activity? Is there any?
Sir, in case of osteoporosis, I think you're asking to me. So
no, you can in many like diseases, not only osteoporosis, maybe rheumatoid arthritis or other.
So basically, sir, both the functional capacity of these Bregs is being compromised in case of these inflammatory diseases, especially these autoimmune diseases. Both the number of these Bregs and the functional capacity, if the numbers are normal, what people have reported that if the number is normal, they are functionally incapable of regulating these or dampening these effector T cell mediated responses, or the numbers can also be down. And if the numbers are normal, they are functionally incapable of regulating these T cell responses. So both of these situations have been reported in rheumatoid arthritis, in IBD, in type 1 diabetes, and all the autoimmune diseases. So the functional capacity of these Bregs is being compromised, and what we have discovered right now, what we are doing with case of postmenopausal osteoporotic patients, we are taking their blood and sorting these Bregs, and we are culturing with them with osteoclasts. What we have also found that the Bregs from these postmenopausal osteoporotic patients are not that much efficient in inhibiting osteoclastogenesis. So again, that concept is again been revisited here also, that they have a dampened regulatory responses in case of these particular inflammatory diseases.
Yeah, and maybe you can, maybe in clinical samples of osteoporosis, maybe you can check whether is there any defect in the BREX cell number or their function. If I don't think that
We are
data
doing
is
that
available.
one. Yeah. So we are doing
Okay.
that.
So our topic is open for discussion. Sorry, I took the opportunity to ask first and then. Okay, so others can ask and then Rupesh will be to take.
In extension to what Dr. Vani was asking, see, in a clinical scenario for rheumatoid arthritis, I think we quite frequently use rituximab, the anti-B cell CD19. We are always perplexed about that, when to use and when not to use. And most often we use when the rheumatoid factor titer, anti-CCP titers are high, ES are high, and we do get around 60 to 70% of them doing good. So now the question comes is that how can is it also expected to knock the Treg, I mean Breg cells? So how effectively and how efficiently we can reconsider whom to give and whom not to give actually? Is there any way we can work in that?
So definitely, it's a very tricky question. Basically, how we should decide at what particular time we should be. One thing which can be done is that maybe these patients, we can take out what people are also doing and what we are also planning. They see basically these BREX can be sorted out from these patients, and we can look into what is exactly happening. What functional competence, why the functional competence of these BREX is being compromised in the patient samples, and it is not the case in case of your control samples. So if that is defined firstly, then only we can devise certain strategies to basically enhance the functions of these BREX. Or maybe BREX can be normal, they can be X5O taken out, they can be cultured, and they can be transferred also. BREX cellular therapy can also be given. So what we are talking about, rituximab, if you are giving these monoclonal antibodies, all of the B cells are basically going down. So in that case, if there are no B cells, there will be also no BREX, because they are also having similar markers along with the B cells. So if you are giving those antibodies, then we cannot make use of these BREX. It will be better if we sort these BREX, because BREX are in a higher hierarchy. What I think is that they are above Tregs. So if we can modulate these BREX, they will take care of these Tregs also and TS17 also. So earlier I was working on TS17. I was thinking Treg and TS17 cell axis is everything, but it's not everything basically. We have this BREX step higher in hierarchy above the Tregs and TS17 cell axis. So if we can target this BREX, then we can also take care of this dysregulated Treg and TS17 axis. So basically the things are going on at various other labs also, and we are also working on that, and maybe in future I would be in a better position to exactly give you an answer what can be done, what can be the best strategy for this.
Sure.
I hope I answered your question.
No, one of the major challenge I still do have is that when we are knocking both the cells, regulatory as well as the effector, yeah. So we were just wondering how much damage we are also causing by knocking the regulatory group. And if the regulatory dominance was from the B cells, then we may rather pushing him to the more problematic scenarios.
Yeah, one more thing is there, because if you are knocking out all the B cells, the problem is that you are also knocking the BREX also. And yes. Anyway, these BREX are not functioning properly. So knocking them off is not going to hamper that disease, hamper that your therapy.
Okay.
These BREX are already compromised, both in the cell number and the functional capacity. So if you are using your rituximab, they are basically taking out these compromised BREX. So that is not going to affect your treatment regime. So, but what can be done is that because still we don't have a precise marker for regulatory BREX. We cannot say that this particular B cells is a BREX. We cannot sort BREX because IL-10 is the only marker. IL-10, if you're going to stain for IL-10, again the cells will be dead by flow cytometry because you have to fix them. So again, we cannot sort these cells, and we can sort and enhance their functions. We cannot have 100% pure BREX so that we can inject them. So again, we are having this technical challenge, because we can use GFP mice, we cannot use GFP human beings. Yeah. So, okay, so we are again having that technical challenges are there still, and people are working. Maybe one day will come that we will be having some certain surface phenotype markers are there, very, very precise, that we can just sort them out and enhance their regulatory capacity and inject them back into these patients. That will be an autologous B cell mediated cellular therapy for them. Hope so. The day will come sooner or later.
Yeah, we'll wait for that.
Yeah.
Any other question? Quick question. You're all.
Yeah, I will just ask one question. So,
Yeah.
Rupesh, quite interesting thing about B cells, because I never thought like there are so much diversity in terms of BRACs even. So I have one question is, how is the level of BRACs when during the autoimmunity or something, or in the control population, like only the normal individual? Do you see the BRACs? Is it possible to enrich them? The other thing is, other question is in COVID, because we see that 25%, 20%, 15 to 20% of individuals, they don't show any antibody response even after 2 doses. And there is still like, I'm trying to check that if they have cellular response, but they don't have any antibody and they are protected. So is it like there is some, like during antibody generation, this somatic recombination, something is not happening, or what's your comment on that?
So basically, I will just first of all, the first question I will answer that first question first. So that how you can enhance the BRAC population. So basically, there are certain metabolites are there already. For example, if you have, because we are working on gut microbiome and how the gut microbiota is basically regulating the immune system, we have a lot of papers also on that. So we have been using probiotics. So probiotics are basically secreting various immunomodulatory molecules. For the major ones of them are your SCFAs, or acetate, propionate. And we are working on that, and we have found that these SCFAs are basically enhancing these induction of BRACs. And this is how, because 80% of your immune system is located around your gut. So 80% of the immune system is regulated, is around the gut, and the gut microbiota are 10 times more the cell of these, if you take the numbers, these microbiota are 10 times more than in cell numbers with respect to your whole, upon our body itself. So basically, how these gut microbiomes are regulating this immune system is a major part what we are looking into. And these BRACs can be enhanced with these small metabolites of acetate, propionate, and your various other SCFAs. Apart from the HIA is another molecule which has been secreted by these gut microbiota, which has also very strong potential in using BRACs. So we can see whether in mice models also people have also shown that in case of rheumatoid arthritis, the Claudia Moria group is there in your London UCL. So they have been using propionate, they have targeted propionate, and they have found that these SCFAs in the serum levels of these SCFAs are modulated in case of both your RA and control patients. That is very much down in case of RA. And they have restored these SCFA levels, and they have found that the RA is ameliorated in case of your CIA-induced model of RA. So now coming to the next question, what happens in COVID? So recently we have one project coming. Yesterday only I got the approval for that. We are going to look at what the long-term implications of COVID-19 in bone health. So we have also published a review article on COVID-19, and we extensively have gone through the literature for B cells part. And I was just also wondered that there has been no study regarding the B cell responses till now. There have been no great studies. All the people have been looking into your Th1, Th17 responses, apart from some of the papers with the Tregs, how they are compromised. And a memory T cells component. T follicular helper, I will tell you, the T follicular helper cell component has been looked into one of the papers which came, I think, 1 or 2 months back in Science Immunology. They have looked into your T follicular helper cell and how these antibody responses, how the T follicular helper cell population is increased in your vaccinated and recovered patients. And they will basically now, because we don't have access to the human spleen, frankly speaking, if you don't have access to the human spleen, you cannot show what is happening with the antibody risk, how the GC reaction is happening. So we only have the markers for T follicular helper cells and in the periphery also. That's why they have looked into those T follicular helper cell populations, and they were able to devise, okay, TFH population is increasing, and that would be indirectly or directly regulating your B cell responses. And BRACs as such has only recently been discovered to secrete certain amount of antibody. So again, it's a Pandora's box which has been opened up, and with time only we would be able to answer what is happening exactly with B cell responses in case of these viral infections, particularly COVID-19.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope I answered your question, Dr. Sunil.
Yeah, it's fine, but I think we need to really do some studies on that to identify if the antibodies are not there. Are there cellular responses? Are there is they protected? We don't know actually.
We don't know.
Thanks,
okay, I think we'll stop now. So I'll request Dr. Balasubramanian to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you all of you.
Thank you, Rupesh, and all the best.